Hi, my name is Hannes Beem, and if you would like to know how I use the Heightmap to create this image, then I recommend watching this tutorial. Before we dive into how I made the image, I would like to show you where I got my inspiration from. When we go to deviantart.com, we can search for the user, which his name is Matze2001. And we press the looking glass to search, and you'll find this image. It's called Return of Head, and this is a great image, but we can recreate this image because the user Matze2001 shared his parameters. So I'm going to show you how we can do that. We can just select this code and then right click and choose copy. And then when we open Mandelbulb3D, we can use the Open tab and then click on From Clipboard. This will paste the entire code from the clipboard to Mandelbulb3D. And now we have the same parameters set that the user Matze2001 has set, but this is kind of a big image. As you could see that it would take about a half hour to render this image, and that's because the resolution is so big. The image is small, but that's because the viewing is set to 1:7. So let's make this 1:1, and as you can see, the image is now quite large, and that's because it's set to a width and a height of 5000 by 5000, so that's really big. That's over 4K. So let's downscale this. You can just click this button to do a half resolution, and then a half again, and then let's do a half again, and let's just make a small image, a small square image, and calculate this. Okay, so I stopped the render because guess what, we are missing the head, and to get the head you need a height map, and the user Matze2001 from DeviantArt, he left a link to the height map, so this is really handy, and let's open this up. Okay, so this is the height map, and the parts that are dark, those are the parts we want to bring to the foreground, and the part that is white should stay in the background. So the darker this is, the more it's to the foreground. So you can see that the tip of the nose is way darker than the cheeks, and especially the ears and the neck. And now we download this image, and when we have this image, we open it in the folder, and in the downloads folder, could be in a different folder, depends on how you've set up your browser. Now we're going to cut this image. Just right click and choose cut, or Ctrl X on the keyboard. And we're going to paste this into the installation folder of Mandelbulb3D. So in my case, it's in the documents folder. You can place it anywhere you want. As long as it has these files, you're golden. And now we need the M3 maps folder. We're going to paste the image into this folder where all the other maps also are. And you can see I have some. These are some custom maps. These come with the program, but these are custom. I just Google them and use them. Now we need a number for this image, and let's see what's available. The first available one would be 17. So we could name this one 17. Click with a pause so we can rename, or we right click and we choose rename. 17 is okay. Press enter. So that's done. We can close this for now. We can close this for now. And this is coming up, so I'm going to tell you about it. This tutorial from Matthias Moore. I don't know, maybe he's even the same person as Matze2001, I don't know. created this tutorial, and it's called Metalhead in 6 minutes, and I use this to learn the technique myself. Now I am teaching you in the way I would teach this, so we can close this now, and we are done with this, so this can also be closed, and we'll talk about that later. So now let's look at the parameters to get the same results. We were missing the head, and we downloaded basically the height map of the head, so we can go to the navigator, open that up, and as you can see we have a formula number and formula values in the formula values tab. When we go up, we see Amazing Box SSE2, and when we look here in the formulas part in tab 2, we see Amazing Box SSE2. So this corresponds with this in the navigator. And the one we need is decombinated. This is a mode, decombinate mode, and it's set to tab 4. So when we look at tab 4, we'll find Heightmap EFS, and that's the one we need for the head image. And it says, it indicates map number 8502. So when we go in here, and we go up the formulas, the formula tabs, and we go to 4, you see Heightmap EFS, so that's correct. And then here's the map number, and it's set to 8502. But the number we used was 17 for the Heightmap. So when we enter this in, just click on it, enter in the number, press OK. Now it's set to 17, and as you can see, the face is coming out in 3D. So this is the correct map number. Now we want what's in the navigator to go into the main so we can render it. So we have to push the view to main button. Now it's sent to this part, so this can close. And now we have to render this again. Okay, I stopped it after the reflections were rendered. It looks really neat, and I could let it go render the depth of field, so this would become a bit blurry, but I think this is okay for now and for demonstration purposes. So what can we do with this now that we have this? It's now exactly the same as the original user created it, except for the DOF, of course, because I did not let that render pass finish. Now we can go back into the navigator, and inside the navigator we can change some parameters from the formulas. Let's say we change the scale of the Amazing Box formula. As you can see, this made quite a big difference, and that's for a couple of reasons. The adjustments is set to mid. If it was set to big, the changes would be even bigger. Let me show you. When I adjusted the slider, it made some big jumps, some big steps. With mid, this is a lot less, and with fine, you go in really small steps, which can be extremely handy. So it's important to understand these adjustments. Min is even less than fine. Usually I toggle between mid and fine. Sometimes you can't go further, then you have to let go and slide again. You can also slide with the keys on the keyboard. And we can change the next formula. And the formula order is also important. When we change a parameter inside the second formula, the influence is less, than when we change a slider in the first formula. So the first formula, changes in the first formula are bigger, usually give bigger results than changes in the second formula. Changes in the third formula are of less influence than the changes in the second and in the first. We can also change some settings from the Heightmap. The H offset is an interesting one. It looks like we are making the head a bit smaller, make it go back, but actually we are moving this wall of fractals to the front or the back. That's what it looks like. And we also have this H scale option. And now we tweaked this so much that the face isn't even visible anymore. So we would have to put it back. And if you want to put it back to the original values, you can just click here, reset value. So that's really nice. This is a very great feature. And what it puts it back to is the settings that are here in the main editor. So how can we use this to create our own image or remake my image? We can start by closing this, and I want to do a full reset. I want to do completely start over, so I'm closing Mandelbulb3D down and opening it again. Also, if you would adjust someone else's parameters, you call that a tweak. And if you make a tweak and you post it on the internet, then you would have to mention the original. You have to mention the person that originally created those parameters. That's just polite and nice and respectful. So if I would use the parameters from someone else and I would make something different with it, I could change add or remove some formulas and tweak some parameters, but still I use the original parameters from that person. Then when I would post the final image, I would mention that person as the original creator of those parameters. So now let's dive in. The first formula we need is the J-cube3 formula, and we are going to put that in the formula section into the Formula 1 tab. You can see that Formula 1 is active because it has a dot next to the number. These are empty, they are not active, they don't have a dot next to the number. And there's multiple ways you can do this. You can pick one from a list, or you can just remove this and start typing. I know which formula I want. I want the J-cube3, so I'm typing JC, and then I get the J-cube3 formula. In the second formula slot, I want a amazing box, so I'm typing in AMA, and here it is, amazing box SSE2. This is the correct one. So now it's alternating between these two, basically creating a mix of these two formulas. So when we go into the navigator, and now we see that this looks a bit weird. It's a complete. The color is full. I don't know how to describe this. Let's go in a bit. First, open up this pane by clicking this button. We can open and close this, and it's the same for this part if you're missing this, you should press this button. I always use fixed zoom and steps because this gives me a lot of control. I can zoom in, and if I zoom in far enough, you see there's no more of this stuff, this orange flat stuff here. And if I would zoom out and then move the camera towards this fractal, these objects, you can see that this becomes more prevalent, and we can make this look a bit better. Let's send this to the main editor by clicking View to Main. Now that it's sent to the main editor, we can do some more adjustments over here. Everything you changed here will be changed here. Everything you changed here will be changed here. The navigator is just an easy, useful representation of what's going on here. So when we change this option, outside render, we change it to inside and outside. And then we have to click the parameter button inside the navigator. And now it looks a lot more, it looks nicer, it's way better. So I often use this function. And what's actually happening, what we are looking at here, this viewport, this is basically the edge of the camera, of the lens. It's where you could say that's where the lens is. So if something is too close to the lens can even go through the fractal, and then it's cutting it. When the lens is cutting the fractal, you would get those orangey things, these. And now we are forcing Mandelbulb3D to create something nice from that. Okay, so now we need to change the parameters to get the desired results. And instead of starting with these sliders, I would like to start with iterations. So let me show you what iterations do. This is iteration 1 of the J cube. When I click this button, we now have 2 iterations of the J cube formula. And I need 3. I've written this down. Okay, this just takes experimenting. And then we go to formula 2. It's the amazing box. And I know that I need 2. And now we can change the parameters. Let's go back to the formula 1 again. And there's 2 ways to change parameters. As you have seen, we can move these sliders. They can even go in the negative numbers, and then we can use the fine or the mid or the big one to move them quick or slow. That was way too much with the big one, so I'm going to set this to fine, and instead of sliding, I'm just going to click here and enter the number that I know is necessary to get the result that I want. Quite a large number. Okay, this is good. And it says CX1 should be 3.9. This didn't change anything, so I'm just going to leave this at 0. And I think that should be fine. Let's change the next. Also didn't change a thing, so I'm going to put this back. I think I made some errors with experimenting. Yeah, this changed something, so that's good. This also changed something, even though it's a little bit. This looks good. Let's go to the next formula. This is a negative number, so we use a minus. We're getting close. And then the fold parameter should be 4.8. And this does not look great. This looks like it's cut, so I have to move the camera back. Yeah, that's better. You can move the camera back with these two buttons. This is back, this is forward towards the fractal object. And you can also use the W and the S on the keyboard to do the same stuff. And since fixed zoom and steps is selected, I can use these zoom buttons to easily zoom in or out. And when this is not selected, these disappear. And let me set the settings to the main, just to be sure. If something goes wrong, I can just click parameters and I'm back looking at this. So that's really handy. And let's move the camera towards the fractal object now. And it's moved forward, but it also adjusted the zoom. This is something that I find undesirable. Now when I choose back, it's not jumping back as to the same look. I want the same look. So get back to the parameter button, click. Everything's the same now again. Let's tick this one so we have more control over this. See, when I go forward and back, it looks the same. And this is the result that I need. Now we need to have the map, because when we zoom out, it looks like this. It looks like a cube, and the desired result is not a cube. We need to have the height map now. So I'm going to send this to main so that it stays here. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when I render it, so I can save it, just to make sure when the program accidentally crashes that I don't lose anything. So close the navigator. And let's make a low resolution render of this. Well, that's done quick. Now let's save this. So we go to the Save tab, and we save this as a M3I file. And the M3I file contains the parameters, of course, and it contains the image. And because the image is also ticked here. And when we would choose to save the M3P file, then it would not have the image, and you would get the parameters, but you would have to calculate 3D again. You have to use the calculate 3D button again to render the image to see what it looks like. So I'm going into the pictures folder, and I see there's already two. I'm going to overwrite this one. Let's save it. Yes, I am sure. Okay. So now we need the height map, and we need to download the height map first. So I'm going to use Google, and I'm going to use the search terms skull height map. And sorry, this is in Dutch. It says afbeeldingen, which means images. So I'm going to click on this button to get the images. And here we see the skull images. This one is the one I used, only this part. And you can choose whatever you like. All these are good. These are good. These are not good because it's chaotic, but you could use it. It might be weird, but maybe cool too. Here are some usable images. You cannot use this. You cannot use this. This already has an example of what it could look like with a flat surface. If you use this as a height map, you could get this in Mandelbulb3D, but this could also be fractals. It can be a plane. It's also possible in Mandelbulb3D just to create something that looks very similar to this. and this one could be cool. Looks cool. This is usable, and somehow this is inverted. Like the other image, it had the black was the point that's most towards you, and the black here is what's furthest behind, and the difference is in the height map. So when I'll show you what I mean in a second. Let me just first download this image and then save the image as by right clicking. Let's put the image in the Mandelbulb3D installation folder, in the M3 maps folder. Let's pick a number. Let's see, 16, 23. So when I would use 20, it would be perfect. Let's take a round number and then save it. Now we can use this, but when we use this in Mandelbulb3D, it would create all these skulls, because the height map has all these skulls in it. Now I would like to subtract just one skull, so I'm going into Paint. You can search here for Paint. Let's open the map, File, Open. And the folder is already open, so that's easy. And we look at the map 20, and then we use the select option, and we make a selection like this. Try to keep it a bit symmetrical, because that would look better on the final image, this image specifically. Now we need to crop this. We have this image now, and we can just save this and exit the program. And what I was talking about earlier, it depends on if the black is the background or the white. And here the black's the background, and what's closest to you in the camera is white. And how can we use this? We go back into Mandelbulb3D, and we need to add the height map layer, but this has to, you have to do this in a specific order. If you do not do this in this correct order, you will get an error message, or Mandelbulb3D will just crash, and you have to open it again, and if you have not saved your work, you could lose it. So this is important. First, you choose the formula tab that you want to put the height map in, and it doesn't matter if it's 3, 4, 5 or 6, as long as it's empty, and you can see that it is empty by clicking on it, or you can see the dot next to the number indicating that it's not empty, that there's a formula active. So the third one is the first available, so I'm going to use that one, and then we can find the height map we need in the diffs shapes list. So Heightmap 2 IFS is the one I'm going to use. And if you would want to add another formula like this, a regular formula that's not a diffs, that's important. You can only alternate between regular formulas. If you would try to alternate a regular formula with a diff, you would get an error message. So I could move this formula tab with this formula 1 to the right. So that would be shift formulas 3 to 5, a position to the right. That shifted the formula that was in formula 3 tab to the formula 4 tab. Now, when that's done, you click decombinate and you choose the formula where the diffs add. So the first EFS is in formula 4 tab. So this number should be 4. The mode is decombinate. The formula number is 4. The first EFS formula, is in formula 4. So this is correct. This should render correctly. Let's try this. Map number should be 20. And then we can see in the navigator, we can get a quick look. We do have to click the parameter button first. to get all these changes into the navigator. It has indicated that Heightmap is present, but there are no iterations, so there's no function, it's empty. Now that we've clicked parameters, we can see that it filled in the parameters here, and we see the Heightmap placed in the scene. And the skulls are like imprinted, so it's sort of negative. And to get that back, to get them to go towards the camera, towards us, we have to change this H offset from a negative number to a positive number. And my original was 0.9. I just entered that in. And this did not do enough, and I am explaining this all wrong. The H offset would move this Heightmap towards or from the camera. Look. Oh, we need a bigger value. See? It went further away. And now it got closer. And if we want this, the skulls to go towards us, popping out instead of being imprinted, we have to change the H scale. And this is now a positive number, and I will make it a negative number. Now you can see the skulls are all popping out, and this is the effect that we want. So there's still something that's not exactly right. The formulas here, these fractal formulas should mix with these Heightmap, with this Heightmap layer with the skulls. And to get that effect, we need to change the DE comp setting to max. Let's see what happens when we click parameter. Yes, this is more like it. Now they are sort of mixed. And to get the exact results I want, I have to zoom in now. And I might have to change the camera angles. So we can zoom in with this button. You see I'm losing my image, and that has to do with the far plane. When I change this to 1000, the far plane goes further away from the camera, so we can see more of the fractal. Okay, I need to move the camera towards the fractal, otherwise we will lose it again. And these steps are like baby steps now. When the zoom is smaller, when it's a smaller number, we can do bigger steps. It's still not enough. Let's set this sliding plus walking steps to 100. Then do this again. Yeah, that's way better. Now I want to recreate the image the way I had it originally, so I would have to change the camera angles. I like this also, but I want to recreate my original image. So you'll have to set these values. You have to set this value, and these are angular degrees. So this is a 5-degree angle, and you can change the angles here at the looking functions. Okay, that's really nice. Now we have to get this to turn a bit, so we use rolling. And this already looks a lot better, but we have to slide a bit more. That's too much. And so we can lower this value, or you can use the shift button. If you hold the shift button, it makes smaller steps. And when I look at this, I think I still have to change the angle. If you would set this to 90 degrees, it would be really intense you would get you would get a different result quick. Look, this is a 90-degree turn, and you can see that with this arrow what happened. Okay, so now we're back, and this needs to be a lower value, obviously. If you want to move up, we're moving the camera up, holding shift, moving the camera down a bit. It's already looking a bit better. You can use the keyboard instead of this arrow, the C. It's too much, so I'm holding shift and moving back up with E. Also, I don't see a lot of the image like the original, so I have to change my resolution. Let's put this into main for now. And let's turn this into a HD resolution and render it. Okay, now to get a better view, we can change the viewing option from 1 to 1 to 1 to 2. Now that's to 1 to 2, it's divided in half. And it also applied anti-aliasing, which makes the edges look a bit less rugged. You get nicer edges. So this doesn't look anywhere near my original image because the colors aren't right, and this is a sphere, more like a sphere instead of a box, and the skulls look imprinted instead of coming out. So I have to change some more settings. Let's go back into the navigator, import these settings from here, the resolution and these parameters, into the navigator by clicking the parameter button. Oh yeah, I need to move this like this. Indeed, now it's looking more like the original. Yes, now we're getting closer. Now we need to turn this into a box, and I think I made a mistake with some settings, so I have to check them. Yeah, this looks good. It should be in the height map then. The H offset is probably wrong. Yes, now this looks like a box. This is correct. And the H scale is a positive number, that's why it's imprinted. The white is now moving away from the camera, and the black is moving towards the camera. And we want to reverse this by choosing a negative number. Yeah, that's great. This is what it should look like. Now we're getting close. Let's zoom out a bit. Okay, let's move a bit to the right. It's too much, so I have to lower this value. Now I am holding shift, so I'm getting even smaller steps than this 20. And let's move up a bit. I moved up too much, so I held shift. I want 2 rows of skulls visible here, and I want almost 3 here. This has 2, that's fine. Okay, this looks good. Let's send this to the main editor to render. Okay, so this is a lot closer to the original image than we had before, but still there's more work to do. As you can see, we do not have dynamic fog. This is just very crisp and clear, and we need some fog. And this is not black and white. This is colored. And to change that, we need to go into the lighting tab, lighting port, and there's a couple of tabs and lots of options here. First, I want to change the light. This is light 1. We can use 6 lights at the same time. And light 1 is set to global light. We're using the global light now. And these are correct, so I do not have to change these. These are the position. Let's take a look what happens when I change this. We are changing the X angle of the global light, and we can change the Y angle as well. So these determine at what angle the light comes in and lights up the fractals. You can also use the keyboard to move this. When you press the right arrow, it moves to the right, but it goes a bit slow. The shift option doesn't work here. That's only in the navigator. And you can choose relative to object, but that's only important if you are using if you are creating an animation. For just a flat image, it's not necessary to click this. And if you would have it ticked relative to object, then this would stay, these settings would stay relative to the object. So if you move the camera, the light settings would still be focused on the object instead of moving with the camera. This color is all wrong. It's yellow. That's okay if you want it to look like it's sunlit, but I'm using a grayscale. You can move this one up and down and make it completely black so there's no light, or completely white so it's fully lit, and I want it to be a bit dimly lit, so I'm choosing a gray color for the light. You can also use the color picker here. You can choose some basic colors, whatever you like, and you can set a specific color to the custom colors. So when I would choose, let's say, this shade of yellow, I could add it to the custom colors, and then it's here. When I press OK, I can use that color in other places. Let's say I would have the dynamic fog and I want it to be yellow. Then we get a yellowish dynamic fog. If I would create a sort of red color and add it to the custom colors. Now the scene is lit with light 1 and it's lit in red, but I also want the dynamic fog to be red. So I just click left, choose from the custom colors, and now I have the same color for the dynamic fog as I have for the light. But like I said, I want to have a grayscale color like this, and the dynamic fog should be white. So it looks more like this. And to get the exact settings like I have in my image, I would have to tweak some other options as well. If this is fully to the right, this is completely white. When it's fully to the left, we have an opening here and an opening here. So it only puts fog on the fractal object and not in the environment. That's the far offset here. And I think it looks best when it's right here. You can also blend the dynamic fog, which gives it a different look, and you can choose the only add light option, or you can combine them. It doesn't do much in this image. It's a matter of experimenting. And we also have the gamma. So when this is moved to the left, you get a more contrasty look. I usually do this a little bit. I like it. Maybe not too much for this image. And then we have ambient colors. We can change these ambient settings. So I think this changes the colors that are reflected from the object. So this is ambient light. Let's make it a bit grim. Now the background is black and blue, and they fade into each other, and you can change how much is available with this slider. If it's completely to the left, the background is completely gone, so the background picture could become visible, and a background picture is optional. And you can choose to have the background picture as a sphere, so it looks like it's stuck to a spherical object, and then you can manipulate the axis, and you can also determine the lightness of the image, which works regardless if this is selected or not. And these sliders do not work regardless. These three sliders, the axis sliders, are committed to the full background sphere option. Now what you see here is an image of some stars which I got from Google, and you see them here, but I do not want them, so I can just untick this and they're gone. Or I can keep it and I can use my depth option to make it. Okay, something went wrong. This sometimes happens. It's a bug in Mandelbulb3D. Maybe I can fix it by resetting the folder. So I go into the Preferences tab and then go to Initialize Dirs. Initial directories, sorry. Initialize Dirs. I meant initial directories. Then we have the background pictures option, and this should be set to the folder that you create yourself. So you go into the downloads, documents, in my case, or wherever you have put this folder. Then you create a new folder that's called background or backgrounds or whatever you want. You can name this folder whatever you want, as long as you enter in the same name here. This should look like this. This is where your installed folder is at, and this is the folder where the background is in. So when we go into the backgrounds folder, we can find this background I put there. And when this is all done, you should choose it. You should be able to choose this from this tick box. And I think this is a bug because it's not showing. Yeah, it's also not showing here. Well, and this just worked. So I'm going to leave this alone for now, and maybe reopening the program will fix it, but that's something for a later time. What I want to say is that when this goes to the right, you are blending these colors with the background picture when it works. Well, I want this to be completely black. So I'm setting both colors to black. And the only thing that changes when you slide this to the right is that this becomes brighter. Don't ask me why, it just happens. And you can choose far depth fog, or you can tick it or untick it, but in this case with this fractal it doesn't matter. Some fractals it does matter. I think it depends on how deep you can look into your fractal and how far the background is away. You can also set this relative to object, but this is only important when you're animating. And you have these three options which are interesting. Look at this section here. This is strange. This should do something. Maybe if I change this to white. Yeah, that's it. That's it. With this depth option, we also bring out the dynamic fog more. And with these options, you can change the way that looks. I think that's really interesting. There's some more options here. We have a diffuse shadow, and we have ambient shadow, second reflection, mode 2, and roughness. The mode 2 gives it a different look. That's I think that has something to do with the way the light hits the fractal. And roughness only works when in the calculation tab you have set smooth normals. And this is set to 0. The roughness would not do a thing. And the effect the roughness has is small, but you can see it. And roughness usually means the roughness of the surface of a object, and that determines how light bounces off of the surface, and that determines the way you see the object. So let's set this to 8 and let's do a render. Okay, let's change the roughness and see what happens. When it's completely set to the left, it becomes brighter because there is no roughness. And when we add roughness, it becomes darker. And that's because there are the light gets trapped a bit in the roughness of the surface from the fractal. So let's see, what else do we have? Let's go into the Object tab, and we can change the map of this image, the colors. When we open up the diffuse object colors, we get the color adjustment screen, and here you see the colors reflected in the image. When I move this to the left, you see there's more. What's the color? I always have difficulty naming colors. It looks a bit orange to me. And all the sliders move together, see? This is usually undesirable. So then what I do is I untick this box, glue sliders. Now I can move them individually without the rest following. And I think what I did with this image is just right click, choose a grayscale color, a lighter gray, and a white color, then a lighter one. Okay, so it would be easier to just copy these boxes. The specular is not really used in this image. It's not necessary, so we can just make this black. Transparency is not used in this image, so we're going to set it to 0, so nothing will be transparent. Transparency is only rendered when you are using reflections, or you can not use reflections, but select transparency in the transparency tab, but then you would have to set it up to not reflect at all. We'll get to that probably in a different tutorial. So now I can just copy a whole stack at once. So this stack of blocks, I hover my mouse over it and I press the C button on the keyboard. Then I hover my mouse over the stack that I want to change. So I paste this stack onto this one with the V from Victor, and then I can copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. This is not right, this should be white. Maybe an even darker one. And maybe a black one. Oh, this is wrong, this should be black. Could have just copied. Okay, so this looks okay. Maybe it's a bit too bright. Maybe we can change that with some other options. So we're going to close this. It's a black and white image now. That's exactly what I need, exactly what I want. And let's see, there are some artifacts here I don't like, but we should change that in a later time, And we can influence the way this map is projected on the image. And we can do that with color start and color end. As you can see, that has a big influence on the image. Okay, this looks kind of neat. Yeah, this looks even better. The contrast is bigger this way. Okay, cool. And there's specular, but we don't need that. So I turn it entirely to the left, but since these are all black, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's all black. It doesn't do anything. For demonstration purposes, I can show you what that does. Just make them white. You can also give them colors. And then the colors would be reflected back from the object. Let's see what this does. Yeah, this is a teeny tiny influence. We see some light specks here and there, and we can increase this with the light setting. If you would choose the Cos option and then specular 2. Now the specular influence is quite big, but it looks kind of cool here, but I don't actually like it. I want this gone. Yeah, I like it all dark and grimy. So even though we have specular colors set here in the middle layer, this sets specular, it's not using the specular layer when this is completely to the left. We can influence how much the diffuse colors are used. When this is completely to the left, it doesn't reflect at all. You only see the shapes because we have dynamic fog active. Some interesting option is the user map for the diffuse color, and that would user map would replace these colors from the diffuse layer with a map. And you can choose a map with these buttons. You can scroll through them, or you can just right click in this box and then choose one manually. And you can manipulate the map with the scale, and of course rotation options and offset options. And when this is not selected, not ticked, you would have the options for the diffuse object colors map, and you can use the 2 choice, which changes the look. You can choose no interpolation. And then this would look really strict. See? Now they're flowing into each other when this is unticked. And we can change the color variance on the Z axis. You can get some interesting results with this. If you want to reset a slider, you just select it and you'll push the 0 button on the keyboard. Sometimes it's the 1 button, often it's the 0. And all these settings, they can be stored, which is really cool. I can store all these settings in a preset like this, and then click empty space. So now when I would choose another preset, it would look like this, or this, or this, and I can just go back to what I had with this button. This is the preset I saved by clicking on the M button and choosing an empty space. There's another option, you can save to a file. I've already done this, so I'm just going to override this one, or make a version 2 to keep this file. Save. And now when I've changed some settings and I didn't like it, like this is ugly, I'm opening the file and everything's back as it was. So I'm happy again. Now there are some other options we need to discuss. It's in the calculation tab. You want to make this look as good as possible, and that happens also inside the calculation tab. So let's go through the options, and what I want to show you first is the DE stop. This is set to 1 now. Let's see what it does when it's set to 10. Okay, as you can see, we lost quite a lot of detail, and that's because the DE stop is set to 10, and I would revert this back to 1. The vary DE stop on field of view, it's an important feature. I usually leave it on because the DE stop changes with the depth now. So it could become more or less detailed the deeper we look into the fractal, and I like that option because when this is unticked, every part of it would have the same detail, and it's just something that I prefer not to use. For the next option, the raise tab multiplier, I will not render the full image. I will only render a part and create a bigger resolution so you can see better what's going on. Let's set this to 1, so we already are zoomed in more, and we're going to increase the width and height of the image. Now it's at 4K resolution, and since this box was ticked, it also automatically changed the DE stop from 1 to 2. Because I upscaled it by a factor of 2. Just one click is scale the image size by 2 up or down. That's what it says when you move your mouse to this, and then you hover over. So let's set this back to 1. We want a lot of detail, and the raise tab multiplier is set to 0.5. We're going to leave it like this and then render. I stopped the render early on. I didn't let it finish because the effect we need to see is already here. You see this noise? This has to do with the way Mandelbulb3D renders. This is a quite unique way to render. It's using distance estimation. That's why it says DE stop right here. And what it does, there's like I think maybe light rays that hit the fractal, and they can go they can hit the fractal and come back, or they can go through the fractal. And when the raise tab multiplier is set to 0.5, it takes bigger jumps, so it's easier for the light ray to go through the fractal and then bounce back instead of hitting the fractal and then coming back. So we have to lower this value to 0.1, just to be sure. You can use 0.3 and see how it looks, but usually I don't mind if it renders a bit longer when it's an image, and I'll just set it to 0.1, because you'll also lose time when you're experimenting with it with 0.3, 0.2. I don't want to lose too much time, so I'm just setting it to 0.1 and go. If you're lucky, it's like a lottery. If you're lucky, it hits 0.3 and it's fine. But I don't like to gamble that much with the Mandelbulb3D. And when you're doing animations, then it's absolutely worth it to check which raise step multiplier is best, because when you're rendering a lot of images for animation, like I said, you have to render a lot of them, and the longer it takes, the more annoying it is. You want your renders to finish as quick as possible when you're doing animations, of course. You don't want to waste time. Now, I've changed the setting to 0.1, and now this should be solved, the issue with this noise. Okay, so if you looked right here, you could see that it took a lot longer to render this. This rendering was way slower, but there's no more noise here, and the noise here is also gone. There was a huge difference. There's still noise here. I don't know what's causing this noise, but it could be overstepping. And overstepping can be reduced by changing the step width limiter. So let's change this to 0.5, or let's go crazy, 0.1, which could also lengthen the render by a lot. But it could solve some overstepping issues inside of the fractal. Also, step count could be an influence. Usually 8 is good enough, and we can increase it to get a better result. And this also influences the render time. The higher the number, the longer it takes to render. So it's often worth it to experiment with this, especially when you're rendering animations, of course. And the smooth normals, when it's set to 0, it's a bit faster than when it's set to 8, but like I said before, I like it to look a bit more grimy, so I like to have this smooth normals set to 8, and then in the ambient tab set the roughness completely to the right, so it becomes a more dark and grimy image. Let's see what happens, and the normals on DE, and it says uncheck this if the image looks flat and noisy. Well, there's some noise here, so maybe this also helps. Multiplies the first step with a random number to give overstepping artifacts a noisy look. Also reduces banding in the dynamic fog. Yeah, I think I'm going to untick this. I think the image would look better without it. So let's calculate it again. Okay, I stopped it a bit early because this was the only thing that changed, and I was hoping that that would change, and it did. It still doesn't look real good, but it's not really ugly, I think, and this could be just the way the fractal looks, but we could change some more options, and it did not do. You could also see that it took 2 minutes longer because we changed these settings. I think if we want to change this a bit more, maybe we could change the step count. I'm not sure. Let's go extreme 31. Let's see what that does, and if this doesn't change, then probably the step width limiter, because we set it to 0.1 instead of 1, it got rid of this noise. But we're going to see now if it's the step width limiter or the step count. Okay, I stopped it. As you could see that it took a bit longer to render, but not that much. So the step count is also not doing much. So a step count of 8 to 12 is perfect. And the step width limiter was the one that improved the look of this together with the raise step multiplier, but the raise step multiplier with 0.1 still had noise, so we reduced the step width limiter and we got a bit of a better result right here. So now that's clear. Let's make a smaller image. And render this, because we still have something to discuss, and that's the shadows. Okay, so the image finished rendering, and it did the main render pass and the shadow pass, and we rendered SSAO 24 shadows, which are shadows that look like shadows that are used in games. Maybe not in today's games anymore, I don't know, I'm not sure. But it used to, old games would have shadows that would look like this. In the lighting tab, we can influence those ambient shadows afterwards. We could increase the look of the shadows, and we could decrease it. Now there's no shadows rendered, it's just a lot of light reflecting. And how you set this is determined by your taste, of course. Let's see the difference between shadows. Let's go back to the post-process part. And you could also render hard shadows, and by clicking this box, when you tick this box, it would be rendered automatically. You can set which lights create hard shadows, and you can change these settings. You can have softer hard shadows, and that the softness of the hard shadows, you can determine that in the ambient tab with diffuse shadow. That's why it says only if hard shadows were calculated. Then you can influence them. Of course, this does nothing because hard shadows aren't calculated. So let's go back to the post process and then change to distance, estimation, ambient occlusion, shadows. That's what the EAO stands for. And the first step, random, you can tick it if there are formulas that have bad distance estimation. When they look noisy or whatever, you can solve the issue. Let's tick it just to be sure. Dithering for scale depends on what you have chosen at viewing. If it's the no setting is always fine, and if you have it set to 1 to 2, you can choose this option. It's also fine. If you would choose 1 to 3 and this is 1 to 2, then you would get issues, probably lines in the shadows. The max L, if it's set to 1, it's a bit of general shadows. If you go below 1, the shadows become more local. Let's set it to 0.8. And if you go above 1, it becomes more global. Number of rays is important. Rays 7 looks darker than rays 17. 17 is sort of a more general setting. And setting 33, a lot of rays would bounce off of the fractal objects, so you would have more light in the scene. So I usually go for 17, but it depends on the image. So let's calculate the ambient shadows again. I do not want to do the entire render again, so I'm just going to click calculate now and only render the shadows. As you could see, it rendered slowly, and it replaced the shadows that are already rendered. I would like to check something just to be sure. What if you would reset this first? Okay, so the ambient shadows are rendered, and it just replaced the SSAO24 shadows with distance estimation, ambient occlusion shadows, and the reset button was not really necessary. It just looked the same. And the image is quite done. I just want to change the dynamic fog a little bit. Yeah, I think this is nice. So let's save this. Saving is important. I should have done it more often. Save the M3i file to Planet of the Dead version 2. Yes, I want to replace this. So now all the parameters are saved in a single file with the image itself. And then we can also save a picture as a PNG, JPEG, or ZBuffer. When we save the ZBuffer, the depth of the image is saved in the black and white image. So just like a Heightmap, it would save this image, but with the depth saved in the different intensities of white, grayscale, you could say. And the JPEG is a compressed image file, and the amount of compression can be determined with this number. If it's below 95, it could become visible to the naked eye that it's compressed. If it's over 95, it's almost impossible to see that it's compressed. At least I can't see it. The sharp option, you can match that with the viewing. It's set to 2. This is set to 2. That's fine. And let's save a JPEG. Save it to pictures. Planet of the Dead 2. Yeah, fine. A PNG file can be saved, also in the pictures. And then you can choose between a Windows bitmap or portable network graphic 8-bit, or PNG file, or BMP file. And what the difference is between these two, when you save a Windows bitmap, let's do that. You would just save the image uncompressed, and you would get a larger file size. You would get a larger file size than when you would render a portable network graphic, a PNG file. And that's because the PNG file will put all the same, how do you say this, all the same tints of on the grayscale in the same amount of bytes. So everything that's completely white will be grouped together and put into a byte. And this saves you storage space, and the image would look the same. It would still look uncompressed. So let's take a look at the images we have. Let's set this to details so we can see what files they are. This is the BMP file. And let's zoom in a bit. 3 times, 4 times. Yeah, this looks pretty good. And it's becoming a little bit less sharp because we zoomed in. Then the JPEG file is like 3 times smaller. But it also looks pretty good. It's very similar to the BMP, and I just can't see the difference. And then this is the PNG file. It looks good. It looks great. It's an uncompressed file. But this is strange. No, it is not strange. This is correct. The PNG file is slightly bigger than the JPEG file, and the BMP file is bigger than both of them. And that's what I explained. The PNG file looks the same as the BMP file, but it has a smaller file size because of the way it handles the the tints, because it combines all the whites into one byte, or all the blacks into one byte. And that's it. The image is done. We have saved our files. We can close down Mandelbulb3D for now. I would like to point you to my Redbubble shop. If you enter in this URL, redbubble.com/people/fractalfactory/shop, you go to my page, and here you can find some images I put on Redbubble. Maybe I'll update this someday, but for now we have the Planet of the Dead available. You can buy it as a sticker, but you could also maybe get a mug or a tapestry. And what's also available, I like the pillows and cushions. I would love to own this pillow someday, but I don't think my girlfriend will like it, so maybe for my studio room I will buy some of these pillows someday. And you can also buy a disc plate, and the disc plate is pretty cool. It's a metal plate, and you can stick it to your wall or whatever surface is flat and big enough with a magnet, and it could look like this in your room. And you can order different sizes. We have a medium size, a large, and extra large, and you can choose between matte, gloss, and you can choose a frame, but I usually choose no frame, and then a matte or a gloss. But matte or gloss I choose depending on the image. I think for this image a matte could look better, but that's just a personal taste. And if you would like to thank me for this tutorial, if it was helpful for you, you can buy me a coffee, and you can go to my website and do that, or you can go to buy me a coffee directly, and I will paste the links in the descriptions. I thank you very much for your attention, and I would love to see you again in another tutorial.